So far, my sound seems to be good. So I'm here and I can hear and I'm well.
Okay, let's start with your journey of flamenco. If you kindly tell us a bit more, because you seemingly an ambassador of flamenco guitar to the rest of the world as well. So if you kindly tell us a bit more and a bit of performance.
That's a nice way of putting it. In a way, I suppose I would like to think that, but and it's a nice thing to be. If anything, an ambassador of any culture is a lovely thing to be. Yeah, I mean, maybe some of you, even to start off with, you think of flamenco and you think, of course, Spain. You don't think of someone who speaks English with a very English accent. So maybe that's the first thing I should address. Really, is I grew up in Spain. In fact, in Madrid, in the capital, and my mother's from Cordoba, which is in the deep south of Andalusia, of Spain. But actually, I was born, strangely, in Oxford, just by coincidence. My father was working there. And but really, it's an interesting, you say, my father is British, by the way. So I went to, and also, even though I grew up in Spain, I went to a very British or a very English-British school. So that's why I continue to speak English during the day, and of course the rest of the day I used to speak Spanish. So that clears up why I sound so English. But anyways, the thing is about it is, of course, traveling, being bicultural, if you like, Spanish and British. What used to happen, of course, my earliest memories of flamenco really is when I was 3-4 years old, perhaps, and just having a sound and going to what we call, it used to be called in Cordoba, it used to be a swimming pool called El Fontanar. If anyone knows, if anyone's of my age in Cordoba, they will remember. But and so my earliest memories of flamenco really is going to the swimming pool with my grandparents and walking around the streets of Cordoba, listening to the sounds of flamenco. And of course, we're talking very late, very late, more early 70s, really. No internet, no videos, no nothing, of course. So the only way of discovering this music was by going there, and that was exciting in itself, in fact. But so really, my first memories are not only going to visit my grandparents, but also with in fact my mother, who we used to travel, as I said, between Spain and the UK, because my father had a house, my parents had a house in Oxford, and we always kept that house, in fact, and we used to come back to Oxford for a month or 6 weeks every year to check the house and paint it up. But we would sing, my mother would sing on the way. She would do some what we call palmas, which literally means palms of your hand. And she would sing kind of, songs and just by accompanying herself with some rhythm, and sing some folkloric or some flamenco songs. And of course that really kind of ingrains, in my opinion, or in my experience even, that ingrains that kind of seed, if you like, that kind of beginning of flamenco for me. And so later on, as I got a little bit older, and I think it was really sadly my mother passed away when I was a teenager, and I think really it was my mother's passing away and illness that maybe made me even more get into the culture of my mother, in fact, and so then I just dedicated all my hours. Sometimes, I'm sure you've heard this from other musicians or creatives, so you spend 10, 12, 14 hours a day in your world and your music, in this sense. And so that was the beginning for me in Spain, in that sense. And of course, then I met some people and met some friends, and they're now friends, met some musicians, and I auditioned for a group in Spain, in Valencia at the time, actually, which is not the heartland of flamenco, but so I started playing with the group there, and then continue from there on, really. And of course, there's a lot of experience has happened since then. But those are the kind of the beginnings of my career, if you like, and of my interest in flamenco. So really, it's in fact it's interesting. But I don't know if any of you have been to Cordoba, but if you have, it's still there. I think it was 1961 in the main square of Cordoba, called Plaza de las Tendillas. And I remember this as a very very young kid. There's instead of there's a big church there, of course, and instead of ringing the bells as they do every every 15 minutes or half an hour and then on the hour, instead of doing that, they actually, it's the only place in the world that has a guitar playing by a man called Juan Serrano, who's still alive actually, and it just does. it does it even higher up on the fretboard, and it's just such a beautiful sound. And I think that actually, I actually sent him a message just a while ago saying that that was one of my inspirations. One of the things that actually made me want to play originally, from when I was even too young to almost remember, was that clock chiming of the guitar was just, and it still is going. It's apparently the world, well, it must be the world record. It's the only one anyway, but it's a phenomenal thing. So if you ever go to Cordoba, you must go to the main square and listen to the guitar chiming. So that's my kind of initial experiences with flamenco. But what I wanted to do today, in a sense, is I wanted to show more than do a concert. I wanted to perhaps, as you were mentioning, saying being a little bit about the ambassador, perhaps if that's possible, of flamenco guitar, is to show people, and I always like educating myself and educating others in my world, and showing them what we do in our world. And today it'll be a little bit about traditional flamenco guitar. In fact, now I don't know, many people may not know, but in flamenco, in fact, the origins of flamenco come from what's called el cante, which means the chant. And so originally, people would be singing, of course, and doing their palmas de clapping, and and you start to sing a song. So you would use your feet and your hands and your voice to express yourself, of course, because that was the most natural instrument in a sense. And of course, then eventually, over the decades, over the centuries, the guitar appeared. And when it appeared as the form that we have now, then essentially what the flamenco guitar was an accompanying instrument, and that's what essentially traditionally flamenco guitar is. It's an accompanying instrument. So you'd have someone doing the clapping, someone doing the dancing and the singing, and you would be playing, accompanying along. Very simple, what seems like simple. And the singer would play, but you would kind of play just chord sequences and as I say, very not so basic, but you understand. It's not so virtuosic in a sense, compared to today anyway. But so people would do that, and of course over the time, technique improved, and now we have fabulous musicians, fabulous guitarists. Of course, the most famous one of possibly of all time was Paco de Lucia, who just revolutionized the guitar, and unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But he was the master of all masters in a sense. But today I'd like to start off by just showing you a few rhythms and a few styles, what we call palo. Palo literally means stick or stick. And as I said, everything comes from the cante, from the singing. And I'd like to start off by showing you a kind of traditional bit of improvised rhythm. It's not for the people who like soft melodies. It's more for the people who like full-on rhythm. But it comes from Jerez, and Jerez, of course, amazing place in southern Andalusia, where Jerez, the drink, comes from. And but it's also one of what we call the cuna del flamenco, which means the cradle of flamenco. And the beat is it's 12 beats. So we have accentuations on 3, 6, 8, 10, and 12, which is a very kind of sounds very easy and very basic. But when you start doing this. Then you have to find out where those 12 beats are. Now, so it seems simple at the beginning, but the interesting thing I always tell my students also is that for someone who's grown up, for example, in the Western world of listening to pop music and rock music or whatever, I say to them, well, if you listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the rhythm kind of pop rock has, you don't have to think, oh, where's 1, where's 2, where's 3, where's 4. You know where it is, and that's the same with flamenco or any musical cultures. If you grow up with it, I don't have to think where my beats are, and it's just a basic pulse. As I say, with this bulería, you do lots of offbeats and syncopation. So it's all based on a pulse, and In fact, I remember speaking to someone today, not a long time ago, but today it's relevant, is that they were saying that in fact in some of the Veda scripts, I think it was, that some of the rhythms were actually similar to this. And the person I was chatting to was doing some of the rhythms from the Vedas, and a lot of them coincide with this 12 beat because, of course, many of you know anyway, is that when many people emigrated from India in the, was it 8th century, I think it was? I went through, some of them came, after the journey came through into Spain. And of course, some of that culture has landed in the melting pot of flamenco. We've got, of course, Moorish, we've got Spanish, of course, Indian, we've got Sephardic music. We've got a whole big mixing pot of music in this thing. And of course, that's where all of the influences come from. So the idea is with the bulería, is for people to accompany us with their hand claps. And it becomes a big party. And then I'll show you just one other before I let you bring someone else.
Yeah.
But another one, for example, another style is called, because it's more, this is about the history in a sense, is the soleá, which is a very kind of deep sound. And it comes from the word soledad, which means solitude, because it sounds quite mournful. 12. It's also 12.
Yep.
But it has a completely different feel. And this comes from, as I say, solitude. And it comes from barrio, or well, it's now called barrio, the district of Triana, which is a part of Seville. And history says that when the Moors were kicked out of Spain in 1492 with the Catholic kings, is that basically anybody who didn't accept the Catholic kings fled, of course, and the gypsies, the Moors, and everybody fled, and many of them fled to this quarter, which is Triana. And it's again one of the founding parts of places in flamenco, which is why it's so pure and so traditional. When you play the soleá. Has a nice deep sound, but I will come back to all of these things later.
Vinay, Rafael, well, this is a purely improvised.
Very.
Even Rafael didn't know 30 minutes ago, half an hour ago, what is going to happen.
Neither did Ameera.
Ameera didn't know too. But let us see that's how the collaboration actually, the great ideas developed instantly at the, so let us see how it's getting shaped. Rafael will play, and Ameera will give a visual interpretation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for landing us both in this. But actually, it's actually good. It's good fun, and that's, as you say, how things happen. I'll because in case people didn't hear before, it's very difficult to work as musicians and dancers and singers online because there's a lag. So what I'm going to do is, Ameera, if that's okay with you, is I'm just going to play some chords and little bits of melody, quite loose, and just, I don't know, a minute or whatever it is, and I don't know what you can do. Just whatever comes to you from the music. But good luck. I wish you luck. Here we go. Oh, by the way, actually, for the guitarists, if there are any guitarists, I've tuned the sixth string from E to D, and the third string G to an F sharp. So it's a completely different tuning. So it sounds very open like this. So here we go. Just some open, nice chords. beautiful, Ameera.
Well,
Thank you, Ameera.
Absolutely. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Jasmine. So let us carry on with Rafael's very insightful and educational talk on the journey of flamenco guitar. Flamenco.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. Yes, and thank you, Ameera, too. It's a beautiful dance. But yeah, I just wanted to give you a few sounds, more sounds. Really, it's today is, I think, for me, is about hearing different moods and different things. And so, for example, typical palo style, as we say, is really from the southeast of Andalusia. It's a mining chant, and not many people really know. I'm talking traditionally. I mean, really, as Ameera, in fact, I play much more modern as well, styles of flamenco. But today I wanted to show a little bit more of the tradition, just to see where the roots come from. But really, this is a cante de las minas, a chant of the mines, where people used to pick even before the guitar, as I said before. And then, of course, the guitar appeared, and we had this kind of nice, kind of Moorish sound. So it's a bit like this. So you hear a very kind of sorrowful, mournful kind of. It's quite. I think when I play it, you set a mood almost. Even if you don't want to, the music takes you there with the mood of the taranta. It's one of my favorites. But really, in flamenco, carrying on this geographical almost. Journey that we could do today. If we were in southeast of Andalusia, we can carry on down the coast. In fact, whichever way it is we're looking on, and we go towards Huelva, which is the other side, going towards Portugal. And there are so many different styles that I love. And this is a dance form actually, and this is a dance form where Kathak would work really well in a sense, because. You have a kind of it's very much a dance form, and as I said before, some forms or some styles in flamenco are very much for the singing accompanying, some for the solo guitar, but really a lot of it's for the dance, and so it's kind of three rhythm. And of course, the singer would usually do what we call a copla. And that's where the interaction between the singer and the dancer becomes essential. Of course, the guitar too. But we're in the background. We're like almost the drummers of the rock world. We're in the background, even though we're important too. But the dancers and the singers, that's where the interaction with a lot of these styles of flamenco comes alive. In fact, but also one of the interesting and one of my favorite styles really is something called a siguirilla, and it's again. Quite important. It's one of the mother chants, and the mood is phenomenal. Now, the way that flamenco works is that you have normally a guitarist, a singer, and a dancer. And for example, if you are accompanying a singer, it will be quite slow. And the singer would. I'm not a singer, so you have to forgive me. So it'll be very slow now. And then if you are a guitarist, you would continue with your melodic side, but then the dance would come in, and the whole thing speeds up. So, for example, we can have a sigiriya, which is of Hindu gypsy origin, in fact, and it's a 5-beat. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So it's the inverse of the other 12-beat we did before, and it's kind of. When the dancer starts to come in, you can't dance so slow. Well, you probably can dance so slow, but the rhythm starts to go up. Yeah. And then the whole thing, and it's like you become entranced in this thing. I wish I could have the dancer, the singer, and all of us all together, because